afternoon. I am Anne Applebaum, and I'm pleased to be joined by two guests who can speak about the state of politics in contemporary Russia almost better than anyone else.
I've told both of our guests that this is a knowledgeable audience, and they won't be giving you extensive background. We assume you know the basics, but they will be speaking about their own work and what they hope to achieve. One is known well in London, Vladimir Ashurkov, who's a longtime ally of Alexei Navalny, and he is going to introduce Leonid Volkov, who is another ally of Navalny, and indeed the two of them, together with Navalny, were co-founders of the Party of Progress, which is a new, small, hopefully less small soon, political party in Russia. Leonid is also a member of the Yekaterinburg City Council, but I'm going to let Vladimir introduce him and explain him. And actually, they're both perfectly capable of explaining and introducing themselves, so I'll let them do that. So.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you for having us. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure for me to introduce Leonid. He is now, I think, one of the most crucial figures in Russian politics. He combines the world of business and politics. He had a successful career in Yekaterinburg, in high tech, and later in venture capital investing. I think in 2009 he became a deputy in the Yekaterinburg City Council. In 2012, together with Alexei Navalny, we founded the Party of Progress, which we are trying to register, and which by now is by polls considered the most prominent independent party. And I think the sort of high point of his political career so far was in 2013, when he was the campaign manager for Alexei Navalny's mayoral campaign when he was running for mayor of Moscow. And so if there is anybody that Navalny can thank for his spectacular results in that selection, it's Leonid, because he was the mastermind and he was in the center of this network of 40,000 volunteers who were participating in our campaign in Moscow. He was managing this full-time staff of 100 people, always making quick decisions, coming up with new ideas, and the result was quite spectacular. After the campaign, he spent over a year in a startup company working in Luxembourg, and it was a global company, so it was working all over the world. But recently he decided to concentrate on politics. He returned to Moscow, and he is very much in the center of what's going on. He is one of the key people behind this democratic coalition, which was announced recently. So without further introduction, I will give the floor to Leonid, who will speak a little bit, and then we'll open the floor to questions.
Thank you very much, Vladimir. Thank you, Anna. Thank you all for coming. I'll try to describe very briefly what's actually going on now these very days in Moscow, because actually I had to move this meeting from tomorrow to today, because tomorrow there will be a great event in Moscow, a press conference with an announcement of the plans of our newly formed democratic coalition. And this event is scheduled for tomorrow because, surprisingly, things were developing very fast and successful with this coalition. So I want to tell a bit more about what's behind the idea of this coalition, and why this time we hope this should yield for pro-European or pro-democratic powers some success in Russian politics, and also some electoral success. So technically, the two founding parties of the coalition are Parnas, led by former Prime Minister Mikhail Kasyanov, and Progress Party, led by Alexei Navalny. Now the coalition was announced on April 16th. And now, less than a week later, we already have four more parties, small parties, and two important political movements, two important NGOs joining. So altogether we have 6 parties and 2 NGOs in the coalition. Most of these parties are not registered. Most of these political movements don't have now possibility to work freely. Their offices being searched their leaders being interrogated. They all, I used to exist in the political atmosphere of nowadays Russia, and still we are looking with some optimism to the closest political future. Why now? And why everything is developing so fast exactly now? The next major political event in Russian politics will be the parliament election, the Duma elections in fall 2016, so 1 year and a half away from now. And we know that these elections will be something important and something good for the opposition. Just because the regime, Putin, can't win anything during this election. They already have everything, all the power, and they kind of have to play all in when they actually don't want to. So they have to take some risk. Of course, they try their best to eliminate those risks, but still, it's something very unpleasant for them that they have to go through these elections. And so, all the previous large elections were a great source of hope for the opposition and a great source of problems for the regime, as the famous 2011 parliament elections, which resulted in a huge wave of protest, actually the largest one since the 90s, and then the elections of the mayor in Moscow 2013, when only in a very dramatic election the incumbent mayor managed to get 51% of the votes to keep his post, and Alexei Navalny was in the firm second place, not that far behind. So 2016 elections are very important because yes, we see that the Putin's rating is very high, his approval rating is indeed very high, but this approval rating doesn't have anything to do with the general attitude of the electorate towards parliament members or politicians. They all have their common belief that, well, Putin is good and all the others are evil. We don't see, we have a polling service within our anti-corruption foundation, and we are monitoring very closely. We don't see any growth of the approval rating of United Russia, and the upcoming elections will be parliamentary elections. On the other hand, they have already learned, the regime has already learned that massive falsifications, rigging of the elections would drive people out on the streets. They will also have to avoid this. So somehow they will have to balance the situation. On the other hand, facing the low approval rating of the ruling party, and on the other hand, don't willing to, at least we hope, they won't be willing to rig the elections, at least in the major cities. So this creates a clear window of opportunities for us. That's why now we have a very clear understanding that there should be one opposition party, one large coalition of opposition party running in these elections. And at this stage, the most important question is to get the ballot access in 2016. Technically, Parnas, the party led by Mikhail Kasyanov, now has this ballot access. But it's Russian politics, so the rules are changing every month, and there were no two elections in the last 25 years conducted by the same rules. So by the current rules, Parnas has ballot access, and of course this ballot access could be easily withdrawn from this party in the future year, just because of something, just because of anything, basically. This is not a question of legal procedures. This is a question of a political pressure. This is a question of whether we will be able to impose enough political pressure to make them, to resolve this question of ballot access in our favor. So, as right of now, the question is, if Putin lets us run for the state in the Duma elections, then he has some problems, because most likely we will do it over the 5%, we will do it in the Duma, and then he will have some strong opponents in the Duma, and also this party will have the right to nominate its presidential candidate in 2018, and so on, so on. If Putin doesn't let us go, doesn't let us run, he will face a threat of a couple of dozens humoristic tweets and a couple of articles in opposition newspapers that, well, this is a malpractice. And that's all. So this is nowadays a pressure that we can apply, and of course this is not a threat. And of course in this situation, if the elections would be in a month from now, their decision would be not to let us run. So we have a year and a half to change the situation, to develop enough pressure in the society, that we have to be allowed to run. Otherwise, this couldn't be considered a fair or legitimate elections. Building a strong coalition, uniting all the parties, is the first step in this process. Like, we are all together, we are the only one opposition power. The country has to have the opposition. This is an important message, also because this message is clear also for Putin supporters. Most of them would vote for him, but most of them admit that there is a need for some coalition, for some watchdogs, and for some alternative. The other important issue is if we will be able to succeed in this September's regional elections. Because the most usual Kremlin's rhetorics on not granting ballot access to the opposition is like, why should we? They have no support, probably 1% of the population supports them, so it changes nothing if we don't let them run, and we just spare some paper printing the ballots more shorter. And that's it. So the regional elections in September 2015 in several regions are, in some sense, our Iowa or our New Hampshire. So I mean, if we have impressive, if we achieve impressive results in them, so higher than the usual 1 or 2%, then it will be also, it will make also more complicated for our opponents to withdraw our right to participate in 2016 election. And that's why things are getting so fast now in April, because the regional elections in September will be scheduled in June, and tomorrow we will announce in which exact regions we will run, and that we will spend all the money doing the primaries and building the party list for the elections in selected regions. And all the summer we will spend campaigning for our coalition party list in several regions. Our target will be to get to at least 10% of vote in every of the regions we selected, which will be our first step towards the ballot access in 2016 Duma elections and towards a successful campaign in 2016 Duma elections. That's my introduction about where we are now and why all the coalition talks are happening right now and developing so fast.
Can I ask a couple of questions? One is, are you already on the ballot in the regions? Do you know that you have that?
No. We are not on the ballot in the regions, and that's why we are not concentrating on all the regions, but we have selected only 3 of them where so among other criteria, these are the regions where it's the easiest for us to get on the ballot by existing rules. It's about collecting those signatures of voters, which then have to be checked by the Electoral Commission. But to make a long story short, we will tomorrow we will announce 3 regions where we are quite sure we will be able to get on the ballot.
One of the things that the sort of democratic opposition in general has been criticized for is the failure to spread itself or spread its message outside Moscow and St. Petersburg.
Well, in general,
is that changing?
In general, this is not true. I mean, actually, the democratic opposition, or the opposition in general, has won the most of the campaigns it participated in the last few years. The mayor of Novosibirsk, the mayor of Ekaterinburg, the mayor of Yaroslavl, also 28% by Alexei Navalny for the mayor of Moscow, and so on. That's why actually they don't let us run, because
you might win.
Because we might win. But I would say that we indeed, so far, we are less successful in spreading our message outside of the big cities. That's true. That's not good or bad. That's our electorate. But the large cities don't differ so much from Moscow. And another selection criteria of the regions, we have selected those regions where the capital of the region has over 60% of the population of the region. So because we don't have much resources, and we will concentrate on the campaigns in the regional capitals.
Can I ask whether the coalition you're creating is a political coalition, or is it also kind of coalition of ideas? Are there, can you talk about a little bit about the 2 or 3 things that will be at the center of your program?
This is definitely not only a political coalition, but also a coalition of ideas. We are unifying quite different political movements, which actually were different and distinct and had its own agenda. But there are some core values that we believe are important and that we believe we will be able to move. The most general description is actually it's a European choice coalition. So it's funny because the Russian propaganda consequently depicts Europe as you probably know, as well the place where people get
decadent.
Where people come to life to enroll in early gay marriage and then die from overuse of drugs, and that's still our research shows that people do basically believe Russia to be as part of European civilization. So that's all the culture, religion, education, anything. Every Russian elder than 14 years can easily give the names of 5 European composers or poets or writers, unlike Indonesian or Chinese.
So this idea that Russia's an anti-Western or anti-European civilization hasn't worked.
So it's the propaganda is better successful with depicting America as an enemy, because it has a very long tradition behind. So this is quite successful, but not Europe. The idea of Russian being a part of European culture and the idea of European lifestyle and the way how things are organized, the way how the public institutes are working, is still acceptable. On the other hand, on one hand, they keep saying that Europe is about all the bad habits. On the other hand, if you want to sell your goods for more money, you have to name your shop like Swedish tapestry or German cars, and of course, European choice is not about the high quality of consumer goods, but it's about the institutes, human rights, and all other basic values that we share and believe in the coalition, and that we believe are not foreign, are not alien to Russian audience, to the broader audience. So we don't want to concentrate on this large cities liberal intelligentsia. We want to do something that we managed to do also in 2013 mayoral campaign to spread our message to broader audience, which is ready to accept the idea that corruption, oligarchy, and the vertical of power is just not the best acceptable way for Russia to be governed.
Let me just add a little bit on the coalition. I think an important thing is to see this coalition as sort of a final point in the efforts to unite opposition that were happening over the last few years following the mass protests of the end of 2011, the beginning of 2012. There was an attempt to create this coordination council of the Russian opposition, which had 45 people elected through primaries, a procedure which is also will be used to determine the party list in the coming elections, which combined representatives from various parties, and it was a good experience, although it may have not produced any concrete results, but it was a good experience of bringing different political forces and leaders of these political forces to one table and discussing various things on the agenda. And since then, we have been, our party of progress has been in talks with Parnas regarding some sort of cooperation, merger, or coalition. Parnas also has evolved over the last years. Vladimir Ashurkov, one of the three leaders of Parnas, has left the party. Tragically, Boris Nemtsov was killed about 2 months ago. We also had some evolution going from the civil and anti-corruption work, as the platform for it was the Foundation for Fighting Corruption, into more political efforts, creating our Party of Progress, Alexei Navalny participating in the mayoral elections, and being quite successful. So now the main three forces driving this coalition are Parnas, headed by Mr. Kasyanov, who has a legal license, who has a registered party, and is recognized for ballot access in the parliamentary elections. Alexei Navalny and his team, with its regional network, which and Navalny emerged over the last few years as, I think, the most prominent opposition politician in Russia. And these two political leaders are joined by Mr. Khodorkovsky and his Open Russia. He's also, although he cannot enter Russia and he's barred from participation in the formal political life, but he's very much a powerful force in the Russian politics. He's our ally, and a lot of people have high hopes on his later entrance into politics. So these three forces combine in this coalition, and this is a new factor, and I hope it's going to make a change in the coming year and a half until the elections next year.
Right. Maybe you, and then
Stephen DL. First of all, I wish you well with the coalition. I think a lot of us who've followed Russia for many years have found it deeply frustrating over the years when those who value European values, as you were saying, haven't been able to get together, which has only led to the weakening of democratic opposition. So I wish you well on that. But I'm wondering at this point, I mean, I've been following and visiting Russia for 41 years, and in the past year I've had the most difficult conversations I've had ever. There just doesn't seem to be amongst many Russians that willingness to discuss, to cooperate, to see things in a Western way. So my question is double-barreled. First of all, how do you propose going about convincing a Russian population which is getting a whole lot of propaganda from the other side that they should take note of you and indeed hopefully take up with your party? And secondly, you said they can't rig the elections. Are you talking as of the 21st of April 2015, why can't they rig the elections in 18 months' time?
Thank you for your questions. So, first of all, indeed, this is a huge problem that the population is really affected by the propaganda. So when Putin is gone, there will be four major problems that every politician who will take the power will face, and I don't have a clue how to solve any of these problems, like Ukraine and Crimea, Northern Caucasus and Chechen Republic, economics, and what's in the mind of all the conspiracy and all this stuff which people are fed with, and I don't know. It's the latter one being probably the most dramatic problem of all. Still, in the regional campaigns of 2015, we will focus on regional problems. Every region, also every one of three that we have selected for our campaign, has its lengthy and large and problems, like some huge bridge that is being built for 15 years, or subway system, or public transportations, or something else. And each of these problems could be linked to corruption, to unfair distribution of budget, with everything going to Moscow and not to the region. We already did some research on the selected regions, and we have some roadmaps for them, and we can easily show that all their problems could be resolved if we manage to decrease the level of corruption and to build more fair institutes. So we can show how our message, our core values are linked with the everyday problems of the population of these regions. This is the approach that we used by Moscow mayor elections in 2013. Once again, we ended up with 28% of popular vote, even by official results, which is far above this thin layer of liberal intelligentsia, which shares the European values by its heart. We were able to spread this message to a wider audience, and we want to reproduce this approach this year. Talking about the possible falsification of elections, of course there will be falsifications. Our opponents are very successful on this and so on. But once again, this is a question of decision making. So it doesn't cost them anything to write down any results of elections in the republics of Northern Caucasus. So 100%, 150%, whatever, there will be no protests, there will be no one against. But they have learned from 2011 that rigging the elections in Moscow or in larger cities leads to huge protests, and they don't like it. This is what we have here on the wages. Of course, it's important what will be on the other part of the wages. So if they will face a loss, then probably they still would go for large falsifications. If this is a question of letting us get our 15 and 20%, then probably they would select not to go for huge rigging. But of course, it's always a question of where we will be in 18 months from now, how powerful we will be, how well supported will be our coalition, how many election observers we will have, and so on and so on. It's also a question of this political pressure that we will be or not be able to develop in the forthcoming 18 months. Why I am a bit optimistic is that because I know that every long-term project that the opposition has done so far was successful. Opposition in Russia is actually not used for long-term projects. So in the past, we were talking about like, let's organize a rally in 2 weeks and spend 2 weeks on the preparation. When we do something 3 months long, like the campaign of the elections of Coordination Council, which was 3 months of work of a large group of people, or the elections for Alexei Navalny, which also were like 200 people working for 3 months, the result was very good, unexpectedly good. So it's about the leverage, it's about the length of the lever. So we never tried to develop a large project with a lot of people working together for 18 months. It's the first time we're trying something like this. So that's why I'm a bit optimistic, to the extent you can be optimistic in Russia now.
Jeremy Noble. I work with Mikhail Khodorkovsky. I like the idea that we are standing in London and perhaps you and I are representing the two men who might become president and vice president of Russia if everything works out. But it seems to me that we have three weaknesses. I think you've touched on two of them. The first weakness is that the Russian government will do everything it can to keep us out of power. The second weakness is that we have shown a signal inability to work together as an opposition. I think you have discussed that, and Vladimir has spoken about the fact that Open Russia is very happy to work with coalition, and I think that's a very good thing. The third weakness strikes me as being the most important one, and that is that we don't have a national policy. We don't have a national strategy that we appear to be able to get across to people. You spoke about regional policies. I think that's very important. It seems to me that we don't have a national opposition strategy.
Vladimir, as head of our think tank.
Thank you, Jeremy, for this question. And if we focus on the third weakness, it's, coming up with a national idea is quite difficult, and it's not something that can emerge in one person's mind and you spit it out on a paper and it captivates, the majority of population. It takes decades probably of collective thinking and evolution of public opinion. So as such, I don't think it's reasonable to expect that somebody will come up with such an idea. What we stand for, and Leonid has mentioned it, is sort of European choice for Russia, which embodies several things, which embodies fair political system and free elections, free mass media and press, independent judiciary, and more or less market liberal economy. We all think that these are sort of the principle of European values that we adhere to, which are missing from today's Russia. And I think this lack is sensed by the majority of Russians, even though they may not voice it very easily, because they don't have this language to talk about these things. But of course, even a simple low-income person in Russian regions understands the corruption, the money which is earmarked for road improvement, which is stolen by regional government in exchange for good turnout and the right election results on the voting day. The same goes for decrepit state of the infrastructure, schools, hospitals. These are all very visible problems in every person's life in Russia. So I think this is our vision of Russia, which I think will resonate with a lot of people also in the coming electoral cycle. Russia, which is moving towards Europe, towards European values.
Hello, Trevor Barton. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I'm particularly interested in communications, and you describe yourself as a tactician. How are you going to deal in the next 18 months with communicating your thoughts and your vision for Russia to the people who potentially will vote for you in circumstances where the government, as far as we're told, very much controls the television, the prime media source. I mean, what is the tactics, or what are the tactics, or what is your strategy for dealing with that? Do you think that there is any shift in the way the media will act in the future, or is that hoped for? Or?
Let's have your comment as well, and then you can finish this.
Khalid Abdeen, Citation. I'm interested to know a bit more about the structure of your party and your coalition. I mean, how many party members do you have, and how many people do you have working on this election campaign? Because you need money, and how are you sustaining yourself between now and the elections?
Okay, great, thank you.
So two final questions.
So for the question on communication, that's why we focus on large cities. We don't have any chance to get on the television, so internet is our basic and only tool to spread the message, to spread our message. And the internet penetration in large cities is far above 70%, and they're also compact enough so that we are able to cover them during the election campaigns just with some of our volunteers out on the streets. It's nothing really new about it, but that's what we did during the Moscow campaign and what we will do this summer in some other large cities. The structure of a coalition on the party. So there are 6 parties in the coalition and 2 movements, Open Russia by Mikhail Khodorkovsky and Solidarity. Each of the parties in Russia is very small, and because the laws are such that it's very expensive to keep a large party structure. You have to file a lot of reports, like quarterly, including some information on every party member. So we usually try not to grow the formal structure of the party. So our party, for instance, has formal, I think, like 700 members all over the country, which doesn't have anything to do with its support. So we kind of restrict, we ask people not to become member of the party because it just increases the amount of paperwork for us. The structure, so we have members of the party and supporters. So formally, all 6 parties altogether have probably just like not more than 10,000 members, Parnas being the largest of the 6 parties. But the one of the important decisions that the coalition has taken is that there will be one campaign headquarters staffed by the members of and supporters of different parties. So I'll be in charge of this united campaign headquarters, and so far it's very compact. So we have now we have about 15 people concentrated on preparation to this election, selecting the regions, analyzing them, and just looking around what's going on, working on the selection process of the candidates, because we have to build a party list, a sustainable party list in every of the regions. When the election starts, we will scale it very fast and grow very fast. In the campaign of Alexei Navalny for the mayor of Moscow, we started with a team of 8 people in the campaign headquarters in mid-June, and there were 250 people in the campaign headquarters by early September, so in 2.5 months, and we scaled it really very fast, well, because there were young people coming, a lot of them with some startup experience, entrepreneurship experience, and such a fast growth was very natural for them, for myself as well, with my background in IT startups. And that's what we are going to do in this campaign as well. So we will staff each of the regional campaigns with probably 3 or 4 people from Moscow, which will be the core, and then we will just hire some local activists to help us with the campaign in each of the 3 large cities where we are going to campaign, and we will hope to grow these 3 headquarters fast enough, staffing them mostly with volunteers. That's funny. They moved the election date to September 2 years ago. it was previously it was twice a year in December and March. They moved it to September and made it a single election day, so only once a year in September, because actually the idea was to get the lower voter turnout, which is always good for the regime, because they have their administrative resource, some of the people that they just bring to the elections, and they're interested to keep the turnout as low as possible. But to our favor, it gave us the possibility to build large campaign with student volunteers that have vacations in summer, and that once again that was what we did 2 years ago in summer 2013, and what we will do this summer as well.
Right. Thank you very much. I know people have to return to work and to offices. We hope to be seeing you all and hearing from you both more soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.